All of this has happened before. All of this will happen again.
That's a Battlestar Galactica quote, or maybe Peter Pan if you want to argue it, and it's the line I keep coming back to when I look at what's happening in Star Citizen right now. A few weeks ago, CIG was at Level Up Expo in Vegas. It was their first major non-CitizenCon convention presence in years. They had AMD-powered rigs at the booth, CLX gaming PC giveaways, the attendants lining up just to play the alpha. And while that was happening, Corsair was using Star Citizen as one of the showcase games in marketing for their newest flagship keyboard, the Galleon 100 SD. It has a built-in Steam Deck and LCD screens where the number pad typically is. The product photos on Corsair's website show the keyboard stream panel running Star Citizen power management controls. Oh, and there's Cyberpunk 2077 and Helldivers branding too. That's elite company in gaming right now. And Corsair could have picked any other game for the simulation part that they wanted to show, but they picked Star Citizen. There's also a leaked Star Citizen branded Corsair product that I'll get to later in the video. I'm reminded of Serenity. You can't stop the signal, Mal. This game is going mainstream again. So why the Battlestar quote? Well, we've been here before, and the last time a hardware company bet on Star Citizen, they went bankrupt. It's more complicated than that, of course, but if I was unscrupulous, then that would be the headline in the title of this video. In 2015, Mad Catz announced a full Star Citizen peripheral lineup at Gamescom. There was a really cool-looking modular keyboard system with a built-in high-end custom HOTAS called the Atom, and they even promised that the first 2,000 units would be signed by Chris Roberts himself. If you follow HOTAS pricing, $350 for the bundle, including the keyboard, was entirely reasonable. That would have sold really well. But it was never meant to be, because 9 months after the partnership announcement, in September 2016, Mad Catz sold the Cytec brand to Logitech for $13 million, which was less than half of what they'd paid for it not even 10 years earlier. The official line was that they needed cash to focus on their core Mad Catz brand and the Triton headset business they ran as well. The unofficial reality was that Mad Catz had lost the Rock brand peripheral partnership with Harmonix, and the company was just hemorrhaging money. Selling Cytec was a bandage on a much bigger wound. 6 months later then, in March 2017, Mad Catz filed for bankruptcy. The Atom never shipped. A prototype eventually showed up in eBay during the bankruptcy clearance sale, and it did the rounds on Reddit. I don't know, you might remember that. Now, in fairness to Mad Catz, the Star Citizen partnership wasn't what killed them. They were already in trouble. The Harmonix loss was really the bigger bleed. Customers who pre-ordered eventually got their refunds, which is more than a lot of failed crowdfunding hardware delivers. But to be fair, the Star Citizen deal didn't save them either, and it tied up resources at exactly the wrong moment. Whatever they spent designing those prototypes, getting tooling ready, running the Gamescom and CitizenCon presentation, and paying for the booth space, that was money the company really couldn't afford to spend on a product that took years to ship in a market that was still evolving. And Mad Catz wasn't the only one. In August 2017, almost exactly 2 years after the Mad Catz Gamescom announcement, CIG announced a deal with a different hardware partner, Faceware Technologies. They demoed Face over Internet Protocol, FOIP is what we call it, the system that lets your character mirror your real facial expressions in-game using custom motion sensors. Pre-orders for this sensor, it was its own webcam, were teased for early 2018. Faceware posted updates through October 2018 showing prototypes, and they had Star Citizen branding and talking about how they'd iterated through over 100 different sensor designs. And then we heard nothing. The technology itself shipped. FOIP has been in the game for years and years now, and you can use it with any webcam. But the dedicated Faceware sensor that was supposed to be the consumer product, it never came out. Now, it's worth noting that Faceware didn't go bankrupt. They're actually primarily a commercial company. They cater to film studios, animation pipelines, AAA development. So the consumer hardware push was outside their normal lane. The deal with Star Citizen might have just been a test of whether the audience was big enough to justify entering a new market. For whatever reason, over the next 8 years, the major peripheral makers stayed away from the Star Citizen branding. Logitech, who now owned the Cytec brand, never resurrected their Star Citizen partnership. Thrustmaster started showing up at community events like Beacon 2024 with their hardware, but never put Star Citizen branding on a product. BKB and Virpil are boutique HOTAS makers who built their entire business on the Space PC sim and Star Citizen audience, but never got official licensing deals either. The hardware companies that should have been first in line to capitalize on a multi-million backer audience all kept Star Citizen's official branding at arm's length. And honestly, they probably had reasons that went beyond just Mad Catz. The scam rhetoric peaked in 2017 through about 2020. He who must not be named was on every gaming forum predicting collapse. The Crytek lawsuit was still active, and the funding kept climbing, but so did the skepticism. If you were a brand manager during that time, considering a Star Citizen partnership, you were looking at the entire ecosystem of negative coverage and asking yourself if the audience was big enough to justify the controversy. And for most of the decade, the math said the answer was no. Quick break in the argument. The channel's been getting wider distribution lately, which I appreciate, but it also means I'm fighting with bigger creators for visibility on stories like this one. A like helps the algorithm push this further, and the comments are where the actual discussion happens. Drop yours, especially if you got context on the Mad Catz era that maybe I missed. Some of you were there in 2015 and you remember this all firsthand. So let's get back to it. What changed? A few things all at once. 2026 is the year of Star Citizen now. Squadron 42 went from when it's ready to a confirmed launch window with a major announcement incoming. Seriously, book it next couple weeks. And maybe, most importantly, the loudest critics ever moved on or just got tired. The scam rhetoric still exists, but it doesn't dominate the conversation the way it did 5 years ago. Playing the game has had a way of changing people's minds. Corsair's marketing team didn't just decide to put Star Citizen footage on their flagship keyboard's product page because they're rolling the dice. They decided to do it because the math now says that the Star Citizen audience is a meaningful target demographic for high-end peripherals, and brand association is a net positive for selling that hardware to the audience. That signal is bigger than the keyboard itself. The gatekeepers at large hardware companies have run the numbers and decided that Star Citizen is worth being associated with. I mean, I was able to secure an affiliate deal with Azeron for that same reason. I brought them the numbers and said, look, you're not marketing to this game. Let's do something together. And here we are. I'm also already affiliated with Pimax for this game. A lot of people are starting to recognize the value of Star Citizen. This is a market that's hard to ignore now. The leak deal I mentioned at the beginning is part of the same pattern. There's an upcoming Corsair PC case with full Star Citizen branding incoming. I can't give any more details than that or I'll put my source in danger, but the existence of a Corsair Star Citizen case partnership in the pipeline is consistent with everything else in this picture. A keyboard marketing tie-in is just a toe dipped in the water, and the licensing product is the next step. If you remember when Microsoft Flight Simulator came out, the rebranded one, that was a big deal. Joysticks were really in short supply. They were high-demand items. So I can totally see the same thing happening with Squadron 42. As it gets closer to release, you might see a lot more tie-ins, a lot higher joystick production, maybe some new things that come onto the market. That just makes sense. I mean, everybody's looking to make money. Nobody really cares how they do it. I don't know if Corsair's bet pays off. Really, nobody does. But I do know that it's a great sign for the business and for where Star Citizen sees themselves in 2026 that this is happening. Because all of this has happened before, and whether it happens again the same way or differently this time is what the next 12 months are going to tell us. And this is probably the most exciting time it's ever been to be a Star Citizen fan. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.